So I answer the phone. I'm like, I know I'm in. I made it. And he asked me if I had medical insurance. And I was like, no, but I'll get it. If you need me to have medical insurance for the show, I'm good. And he was like, no, there's something wrong with your brain. You need to go to the hospital right now. And I was like, what? What's wrong with my brain?
Oh my goodness. Anyways, we're here today with my good friend, I've known for a long, long time, Santino DeFranco. And, he's a former MMA fighter. He's a writer. He owns a gas station, which we're going to talk about because I have questions. And also, he's one of the best trainers in MMA. Santino, thanks for coming on and hanging out today, man.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Thanks for being. It's been a minute. So it's always good to catch up and chat.
Yeah. So did the wife kick you out and send you to the library, or what's going on there?
No, no, I'm actually in my living room right now. So
that's
I'm
where
looking
all the books
around.
Went.
Yeah,
Dude,
so I'm
Kindle,
looking around.
Get a Kindle.
And well, it's funny. My wife's name is Kindle.
Right.
So
you got a Kindle.
Yes, yeah. So I have a Kindle.
Oh.
I don't need two. Two would be too many.
That's crazy. You have like every book ever there. I'm gonna guess most of those are like a mix of martial arts and business books and some self-help books mixed in there with the occasional novel.
So I'm adamantly opposed to self-help books.
Really?
I would. Oh my gosh, if you tried to gift me a self-help book, I would gift it right up your ass.
Cancel his Amazon thing that I was saying.
Yeah. Nah, they're actually, man, most of these are probably fiction, which is like pretty much all I've read up until recently. Recently, I've started reading a lot more on neurology, coaching, artificial intelligence, learning, things like that. Like that really gets me now.
Oh, yeah.
As a father, but then as a coach to fighters, I want to learn how people learn and ways to learn and how the brain works for learning.
Like how the neural pathways are formed when we're learning.
Yes.
And stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This is why
things
I
like
call
that.
him Santino. I go, he's the John Danaher of the strictly MMA space. I said, you're like Dean Thomas and you are two people that I know extensively and know your work ethic and also are very intelligent because there's a lot of coaches, right? That it wasn't necessarily the coach that was so great at making someone a great fighter, that they just had a bunch of tough guys in a room. And then because they were all tough and they beat each other up because they all had a wrestling background, they're all strikers, and it was usually wrestling, then those teams would kind of come and then they'd go, they come and go. It's rare that you'd see, like if you're on Santino's Instagram, I'm always telling like my friends, like, man, like every third post he's with someone new that's going into the UFC. Like you're becoming like a one-man American top team.
Well, sort of. So we do over at Fight Ready, because I'm at two gyms, and at one of the gyms, Siege, I'm the only coach. Yeah, I mean, there's some assistant coaches and stuff, but really I run the show over there. But over at Fight Ready, we actually have, a team of coaches and stuff. So it's definitely not just me. I think I get a little bit more credit than some of the other coaches. But we have a wrestling coach, Angel Cejudo, who's Henry Cejudo's brother, boxing coach, Alan Byers, and then our kickboxing coach, Eddie Cha. So, of course, I'm the most important. I'm the only one that knows anything. Those guys just show up and run. No, I'm just kidding. They, so we do have a whole team of people that make me look good. I'm just the one that kind of, probably gets a little bit more credit these days.
You just gotta put them on autopilot. You're like the Tesla. Like I get a lot of credit for my tech, but really it's the car doing 90% of the driving.
That's exactly it.
It's point right direction. I don't buy that.
But if I screw up,
second,
it's on me as well.
Yeah, I don't buy that for a fucking second. So, well, let's just go back for a second and talk about like I would say arguably. I know you've coached a lot of guys throughout the years with ACS and moving on your own, but Henry was probably the first person that really was your biggest, most prominent student.
Well, I mean, he would be probably any fighter out or any coach's biggest, most prominent student, probably anybody who hasn't coached John Jones. I mean, he's a two-time belt holder, two-division champion. So yes, definitely. Like, I mean, I don't know that I'll ever come close to having somebody with that much prominence again. Just because, I mean, what's the likelihood that somebody wins a title? What's the likelihood that somebody wins two titles in two different weight classes?
Yeah, it's low, I'd imagine. So how did you guys initially hook up, and what was that relationship like when you first started working together?
We started, one of the guys I trained for a long time, Roman Salazar, who was in the UFC, and he's not in there anymore. Their coach, they were over at Fight Ready, and the coach got fired. So Henry actually fired the coach, and they were looking for a new coach, and I knew Roman, so I was over there helping out. Little by little, I'd be over there more and more and more, and then eventually I got the head coaching gig. And then Henry, actually, it wasn't his I guess other coach, Eric Albarracin, who's been with him since he was, in the Olympics and all that, he actually wanted him to go to Brazil and these other camps, these bigger camps and stuff. He ended up staying here with me and with the coaches that we had. And I think we had 2 or 3 camps before he fought Demetrius. So we had a little bit of a relationship. He had some fights, before he fought Demetrius for the title for the second time. And then, but it's funny, everybody always asks like, oh, what's it like? What's your relationship like? How's it going? And we don't really have much of we're not friends. Like we don't really hang out a lot. We go in, we do our stuff at the gym. He's got a lot of other coaches who he's way closer to. I just happen to be one of the coaches I think he respects on a coaching level, and our working relationship has always been good, but we don't really see each other out of fights, out of the gym. We show up, he trains, and that's kind of that. And I wasn't a part of his last camp. So his last camp against Dominic Cruz, I actually stepped away from. I just didn't agree with a couple of things that were going on in camp. So I stepped out and said, hey, you're kind of, you're going to do this on your own. And, just did my own thing.
What was your first introduction to the sport of mixed martial arts?
Man, I'd been watching when I was a kid, like 12, 13 years old. I think we're probably pretty close to the same age. Yeah, so it was 90.
39?
Yeah. Yep. I'm 39. So it wasn't the first UFC, but I watched the second, I believe it was the second UFC or the third UFC live at a friend's house. Okay. And then I actually, right before I went and watched whichever one it was, the second one or the third one, we had rented the first one or first and the second one, however many it was, and watched the first ones. And then we watched, the pay-per-view live. So I started watching the UFC when I was young, of course. And then something I always wanted to do. That was in 93 or 4.
Had you done any martial arts formally up until that point?
No. I wrestled growing up. So I wrestled in middle school, wrestled in high school. I did a little boxing in high school, but that was probably even years after I'd seen the UFC fights. And then after high school, I, kind of screwed up a wrestling scholarship to a school in New York. Just nothing crazy. I just didn't finish or fill out my clearinghouse stuff. I just didn't have that stuff set. So I just was ineligible for a semester, whatever. And of course I'm young and dumb. So I moved to Arizona and I just wanted a place to train because I was going to try and walk on wrestling at ASU. And just while I was waiting, I knew there was jiu-jitsu out there. I knew there was judo. I knew that was a thing. And so I just walked into a local gym here in Arizona, which we had Roland Soria, Rage in the Cage facility at that time.
Good old Roland.
But, wow. Yep, good old Roland. But he had a gym, and there was actually another gym out here as well. Megaton Diaz was out here. There's actually some jiu-jitsu out here that was in 2000. And I walked in, I trained, and then I showed up to fight the next week. There was a fight coming up. I think it was I probably showed up on a Wednesday or a Thursday. And then that Saturday was a fight. And I just showed up and he was like, oh, are you here to watch the show? And I was like, no, I'm here to fight in the show. And he's like, what? Like you're going to get killed, but okay. And so I went in, I was there, I was ready to fight. And then, I had these little Speedo shorts on because I didn't know where to get MMA shorts. So I had literally
half the people were still fighting with those old weightlifting gloves you could buy at
the Harbinger
with the
metal
and
the
gel pack.
That was half of the people you'd fight had those on. There was no sanctioned gloves, or you get the Quan the little 2-ounce karate.
The Wano ones, yeah. And those were the later ones, yeah. So I ended up going in I was sitting there in these little tiny shorts, and these shorts I still remember they were black, yellow, and white, zebra striped Speedo shorts, and I'm as skinny and white and pale as you can imagine.
Right here, we're gonna put up your you OnlyFans.
Yeah,
we're just gonna play that on a loop. I got these little pink panties on, and I got a yellow OnlyFans.
Put some slow motion hearts.
We got you. You're
going. And so I went in there, and so I get in the cage. The fights are going on. I don't know, I'm the 5th fight or whatever. So I get in there. And it's in a smoky bar. This is 2000, so there's smoke plumes going up everywhere, and these old people, and it was just a trashy place all around. And I get in the cage, and all of a sudden the announcer Roland, he's like, "These are 2 of the best lightweights in the country. Make some noise!" And I was like, "Shit, I'm about to get fucked up because I am not one of the best lightweights anywhere. I'm gonna get murdered." And so I'm looking around. I'm like, "Holy shit, I'm gonna get killed over here." And after a while, this guy comes in, one of the workers, and he's like, "Hey, your opponent didn't show up." And I was like,
Now you're the best lightweight in the world.
so yeah,
that worked out well. You should have got a belt.
He was actually there, and he ended up leaving. So he ended up getting more. He was more scared than me, and he ended up leaving. So they tried to give me a trophy on my way out of the cage, and I was like, "I didn't earn a trophy. Like, take this shit out." And so as I'm walking back, through the crowd of people, through this white trash, leathered up, smoking faces, this old woman, I remember, she's probably 50 or 60 years old. She looks at me and she's like, "Nice shorts." And I was like,
whoa.
Wow.
And I was just like, shit.
And now I was like, I'm enamored by this sport. I must pursue it further.
Yeah.
There could be more.
Man,
insults.
I hate myself this much. I need to do this again. I need to feel like this again.
That's how Drew Fickett woke up every day for 17 years. Like,
yeah,
for sure. So that was your.
But that was it, man. That was my intro to the sport. That was my first week of the sport. Was getting choked up by Roland, showing up at a cage fight, and then basically pissing myself and being called a.
Oh man, that's they don't make a Hallmark card for that. Like, sorry, you had a bad weekend. Your guy left. You got called. You got pissed on.
And all I got was this stupid T-shirt.
Yeah, that's the ultimate. Yeah, it's the ultimate cancel culture apology card. Like,
and all I got were these little tiny shorts.
You can buy these shorts now on his OnlyFans page with the link down here. So so Santino, so you had a bunch of fights, right? You fought in K1. You fought in you went all over the world fighting. You had the ability to be on The Ultimate Fighter, and you found out you had a brain aneurysm, right? I think I was living in Arizona at the time, and obviously the fight community is pretty small. We all knew, dude, that's awesome. Santino's going to go be on The Ultimate Fighter. You're personable. You're a great fighter. I thought there was a really good chance that you won, and then this fucking happens.
Man, that's a kick in the teeth. Like that was one of those things where you kind of make, think about dreams, as a kid, like, oh, you dream of being in the NFL. You dream of, being a race car driver, going in a spaceship or something like that. All I ever figured I would ever do for my whole life is be a fighter. Like I never had a plan B. I never did. It was always, I was just going to be a fighter. And, it's like you get drafted to the NFL, you get your jersey, you show up, and then you're like, oh no, just kidding. You're fucked. Get out of here. And that's pretty much what happened. It was kind of I was told, I'm on the show, went up there, did all of the medicals, all the interviews, all the stuff. And then Dana White called me and, asked me, like, he actually called me and I knew it was his numbers, I had it stored. So I answered the phone. I'm like, I know I'm in, I made it. And he asked me if I had medical insurance. And I was like, no, but I'll get it. If you need me to have medical insurance for the show, I'm good. And he was like, no, there's something wrong with your brain. You need to go to the hospital right now. And I was like, what? What's wrong with my brain? And, sure as shit, went to the hospital and they sent the MRIs and turns out there's an aneurysm. And they don't, it's good though. They do things like pre-fight MRIs in case you have something like an aneurysm in your brain, right. Which, sure as shit I did. And most people wouldn't. And it probably wouldn't affect most people. But, if you're getting punched in the face with an aneurysm in your brain, it's not good. So yeah, that took me out for a while. And
did you have to have surgery? I was told that what happened?
Yeah, so I was told I would never fight again. So I ended up getting a real job, worked for Vanguard financial institution, doing stuff on mutual funds, and then I ended up having brain surgery. They went. I mean, it's not like taking my skull out type of brain surgery. They went through my femoral artery, brought a catheter through my heart into my brain, and put titanium coils and a stent in my carotid artery right behind my left eye. So, and then that was that. So, but they did that. And then about, a year later, 18 months, something like that, I just was curious if I could fight again, what they would say. And, so I called the doctor, called my neurologist. He did some tests, looked into stuff, and, eventually ended up clearing me to fight again. But I sucked after that. I was a good fighter before my brain aneurysm. And then after my brain aneurysm, it was, really I was afraid to die. So it was like,
so you think it was mental more than anything else? You don't think it was a 100%. Physiological reaction, anything? It was just, you couldn't turn that switch to hit the throttle as when you should have a few times?
Yeah. Well, even that, so I had my brain aneurysm, I had my brain surgery, and then my wife ended up having what's called a grand mal seizure, which is the bad type of seizures. Turn purple, foaming at the mouth, it was bad. and she ended up having to have brain surgery, but they had to cut a piece of her skull out, take a piece of her brain out, reattach it. And for some reason, when that was only probably 6 months or a year after my brain surgery. And for some reason, when that happened, that really freaked me out. Cause then we're both mortal, you know, it's like then you can die. I can, it's more than just me. If I die, whatever, but now she can die. And now if she dies, you know, it's kind of a thing. And so I just sucked after that. I would train. I was training with good people in the UFC. I'm taking them down, submitting them, beating them up, striking. I was still good. And then I would go into a fight, and, you know, some days I was a world beater and I go out there and just murder people. And other days I'm just curling up thinking, don't kill me. I don't want, today's not the day I want to die. So I fought for a few years after that. And I was too Jekyll and Hyde. I didn't know who was going to go into the cage, and I didn't want to embarrass myself. I had a good career. I was a good fighter. I didn't want to be that Shannon Rich, you know, Travis Fulton, show up,
collect
take a check,
fight whoever.
Yeah.
Just kind of like, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Got a little more pride in myself than that. So it was like, I'm going to walk away. And that was it. I fought on the UFC show the 9th season, had 2 horrible showings there, and was like, I will never embarrass. It was the most embarrassing moment of my life being on the UFC show.
Were you training at ACS at the time, or were you with the lab?
No, I was just training on my own. I had my own gym. I would go over to the lab and train, you know, with those guys, you know, back and forth, but it was just kind of doing my own thing. I had my own gym at the time, and yeah, it was just kind of, I was training. I had other guys I was training. I was training Seth Baczynski, who was in the UFC. I was training Efren Escudero, who ended up in the UFC. So I was starting to come on as a coach a little bit. And yeah, those last 6 weeks in the UFC show, and that was a wrap. That was it.
So after you decided, okay, I'm not fighting anymore, this is my last fight, how did you really get into coaching full time? Because I mean, like, you know, without getting into the economics of it, especially back in the UFC days, back in the day when guys were making $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 to fight, it was tough to be a full-time coach. What made you decide to pull the trigger?
Well, so this is years ago. This is in 06. I opened my 07, 06. I opened my gym, and then I was, I had it till 2012. And I was training people then, kind of on and off, you know, I mean, but I had a regular, you know, I had a gym, taught jiu-jitsu, had kickboxing, and that was what pays the bills. You know, gym fighters don't pay the bills. It's you know, the regular people. Exactly. Classes pay the bills. But even then I got to a point where I was young. I didn't know if I wanted to do this forever. And so I sold my gym. I went to grad school. I went to school for English. And I started teaching at the college, and I thought I was out. I was out of MMA. I was done. And then I ended up hating Flagstaff so much that me and my wife ended up moving back. We ended up moving back to Phoenix. And then I just happened to look at some MMA gyms for some jobs, just like, what do I do while I'm in between stuff? And so I was teaching at the college and then working at Siege MMA, which I'm still at today. And they gave me stupid money to go there, teach MMA in some classes. Stupid money in terms of like what I was actually doing. It wasn't like I was making 6 figures a year, right. But for working evenings and doing what I was doing, it was a really good paycheck. And so I just started training people more and more and more. And then I had the opportunity to go to Fight Ready. So I stopped teaching. And I was teaching at the college for 3 years. And then I stopped teaching at the college and went over to Fight Ready. And then I'm still at Fight Ready in the mornings running protein practice. And then I still go to Siege at night running, practices over there to this day.
So if somebody walks into the gym and they're like, hey, I want to be an MMA fighter, how's that conversation go?
Generally, when people come in and say, hey, I want to be an MMA fighter, they're assholes and they're idiots, and I tell them to leave. And that's generally how the conversation goes. Because the people that come in, this is all I ever want to do. I want to fight. Oh, have you ever trained before? No, man, but I'm tough. Have you ever boxed? No, man. Do you have any experience in anything besides being an idiot? No, man, but I guarantee you, I'll show you.
There were a lot of guys like that fought in the UFCs, though.
I know.
I think that there's guys I watched walk out of there. I'm like, you can ask those same 3 questions, and I'm pretty sure you can get real similar answers, man. Like, eerily. Not nowadays, but there were some guys like, what was his fucking style?
Even a guy I
usually.
Once.
What's that?
Oh, that was Vinny dropping in.
Yeah, no. I had a fight. It was my first fight that Jason helped me get on the card in Arizona, and they just picked some random kid out of a gym. Went by a nickname of Pure Hate, and a minute later he didn't want to even be in the ring, took his gloves off and walked off.
You know, your opponent was
probably
awesome. Probably a huge piece of shit if they're fighting in basketball shorts. That's like a real good indicator.
Yeah.
The dude just showed up in basketball shorts and like they're the tank top that was the 6 for $5 Hanes, like with the rib tee. You're like, oh, for sure there's going to be a gold chain and some shitty ass tattoo decisions.
Yep. Well, they're a bad human. You know, well, the tattoo decisions aren't theirs. It was because they did prison time. And so they were all prison tats.
Someone
guaranteed
had to do it for him, for marking their
yeah.
property. Makes sense.
They can't fight and they did prison time, like guaranteed if they showed up in basketball shorts.
You're right.
Yeah, I mean, we don't see as many idiots that come into the gym anymore, which is all right. So it's fun. I mean, it's good. It's good that we have better clientele, but man, for the story purposes, I really enjoy the idiots because like the stories you get, you know what I mean? It's one of those things. It's like a Fickett story.
I was waiting in my head. I'm counting down and then how long until this becomes a Drew Fickett story.
Yeah, everything's a Fickett story.
And for a disclaimer, we're not calling Drew Fickett an idiot, but he has done some incredibly dumb shit. Like, and I think Drew's the first person to admit that. If you've ever lived in Arizona from 2008 to 2014, you have a Drew Fickett story, or it's like the 6 degrees of Drew Fickett. You know someone that has a Drew Fickett story, and typically they end in felonies.
They're always in felonies. It just depends on whether they get caught or not. But the thing with a Fickett story is during the moment of said Fickett story, it's uncomfortable and you don't want to be there. But after the fact, you will tell everybody that story for the rest of your life. And so that's like the people coming into the gym, these idiots, is you don't want to deal with them, but they're so awkward and these funny stories occur. So you find yourself telling these funny stories for months and years afterwards. And we don't see too many weirdos anymore. People kind of, I don't know, maybe they've all transitioned to Tang Sudo gyms where they walk into and they get all of the bad people.
Yeah.
MMA gyms, we don't get as many weirdos as we used to. But in reality, though, I'd tell them, train some jiu-jitsu, train some kickboxing, see if you actually like the sport, because you may find out you hate the sport. You don't like to train. And if you don't like MMA, like if you don't like to be choked out, if you don't like to be punched, if you don't enjoy actually getting better on a daily basis, you will hate fighting because it's brutal. It's grindy. You have to grind. The best athlete with the best background is going to be grinding day in and day out, not for 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, but 5, 6, 8, 10 years before they're good enough to make it in the UFC and make money on it. And if you don't love it, you sure as shit are going to hate it pretty fast.
Yeah, and that learning curve has gotten so much steeper too. I mean, there was a time where I was talking to Matt Serra, right? You have 3-4 fights here in the UFC. Now, not only do you have to have several fights or the anomaly, 5 or 6 wins, but you have to have fights against such tougher levels of well-rounded guys than 10 years ago. You're trying to get in the UFC in 2004 or 5. You could have trained for 2 years, taken maybe 5 or 6 fights, and you probably could have snuck in there somewhere. Now it's like, good luck. I mean, there's all these wrestlers now from high school and college, they see that this is a viable path, so people are getting younger. I mean, how crazy, right? Like, you've got 5-year-olds in jiu-jitsu, 5-year-olds doing MMA. Like, how good is the next evolution of the GSPs and the John Jones going to be?
I mean, my kid, I have a 10-year-old. I have a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old. My 10-year-old has been training jiu-jitsu for 5.5 years. I mean, like,
it's crazy.
Get out of here. I mean, and there's those kids everywhere at every gym. And by the time he's 18, I hope he doesn't fight. But if he does want to fight, I mean, look at these people. There's Conan's son, the American Top Team owner's, son. His name is Josh. Super nice guy. He is a 2-time state champion. He won Freak Show. He won Super 32. He won Virginia Nationals. These are the biggest high school, tournaments in the country. He's a JUCO national champion. And then he won, then he wrestled at ASU for a couple of years as well. He's also a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt. He's like that kid is going to go fight a guy who's like 0-2 as an amateur turning pro, right, and just has no shot at it at all. And that's the baseline level. Like, we don't even know, I mean, Josh, I think he's 4-0 now. Like, who knows how he's going to do in the UFC when he gets there? I mean, he could go 4-0 in the UFC, or he could go 0-4. We don't even know. But those are the guys that are the lowest level of guy are JUCO national champions at this point.
Yeah, it's crazy. You know, we saw like the evolution, I think, of mixed martial arts becoming that, figuring out what we were and what works and what didn't. And like the very first UFC, then maybe 20 in later, it was like more wrestler dominated. Another 30 or 40, it was wrestlers and strikers and the jiu-jitsu stuff. And now we kind of have like, we don't have those stylistic matchups anymore. We have everyone cross trains. It's really about where you train at. I think the next thing we're seeing is like the guys like the John Jones of the world that are just freak athletes. The guys that could have played basketball, could have played football, could have played, you know, what makes you that top 1%, that special athlete. It's like, it's crazy to see how good these guys are getting so quickly. What's something like in your gym that like, how do you just determine, you know, if you've got 15 guys and there's 3 or 4 of them have a fight coming up, how do you kind of determine who gets the focus? How do you divide up your coaching time, and what's allowed you to be so successful as a coach?
Oh, that is a rough one. You kind of have, we all have our favorites, you know, so that just, whether it's right or wrong, all of us coaches have our favorites who we're closest to, you know, so you're always going to gravitate to those fighters who you're closest to, just as a whole. Separate from that, the biggest fight wins. You know, I mean, how can I give somebody, say if I have 5 hours, you know, and I have to allot that time, so that say I have 5 fighters and I have 5 hours of training work. Like, you cannot divvy that time up an hour each. You need to divvy that time up in order of importance. Somebody's fighting for, like, we had Korean Zombie come out. He fought Brian Ortega. You know, he just fought Dan Ige. You know, this is a guy in the top 10. He wins a fight, he gets a title shot. That dude deserves 1,000% more time than somebody making their amateur debut or even their pro debut. And don't get me wrong, those other fights are important. Every fight is everybody's most important fight, but it's a hell of a lot more important when you're fighting for $100,000, $200,000 in title implications. And it's not fair. And that's the thing is the sport is not fair. I don't even know if it's not fair. It's not right. It might not be the right thing to do to, hey, you're on the bottom, deal with it. You got to, you know, figure it out. But the bigger fight always wins. And honestly, it just comes down to relationships, you know, like there are people that I'm always going to give more time to than other people, even if it's not right. So it's kind of, you know, if that fight is there, and money talks too, you know, how do I go out and half-ass it when somebody's making 100 and 100 versus somebody's making 500 and 500, or, you know, 100,000 and 100,000
Right.
versus somebody's making 500 and 500. You know, if I'm taking 10% of the purse, you know, I mean, that's 20 grand or $20, you know, like, so
right.
all of those things.
And that $20 goes a lot longer in the way of that guy's pocket than the other 20 grand is, which is the irony, right? Like, it's harder. It's harder to get those guys to ante up, man. But, you know, so when you're training in these 2 gyms, has there ever been like a conflict of interest, or do you guys just steer clear of that?
No, most of the guys cross train with each other. So, yep, they'll go to one side. A lot of times we'll do sparring at Fight Ready. And then sometimes the guys from Fight Ready will come over to Siege at night and just get some extra work. But in terms of fight team, it's pretty much one team, regardless of who they claim.
I know one of the main gyms, and arguably the biggest gym in Arizona that was putting out a lot of UFC guys for a long time, was Arizona Combat Sports, the Trevor and Todd Lally. Do you know what's going on with them? Do they still have a school? Are they competing?
So Trevor still owns Arizona Combat Sports. Todd does other stuff. Last I knew, he was doing some insurance stuff, but I don't really know. He'll go in, I think, and help out. They don't do a lot of fighter stuff anymore. They don't have a ton of fighters. I mean, gyms outside of American Top Team, I mean, you know, gyms fade, man. Look at the Militich era. Yeah. And that was the biggest gym in the world, and it faded out. And Arizona Combat Sports was a big one for a long time, and they have their ebbs and flows. Power was a big gym for a long time. The Lab was a big gym. Right now, Fight Ready, we're the cool new kid in town, but eventually we'll fade out, and, you know, it's...
Well, that's what I've always thought, you know, like, not to cut you off, but one of the things that I've always said is, you look at McDonald's, right? And the average McDonald's is run by geriatrics and pimply high school kids. But what makes McDonald's replicatable is they have great systems in place. One of the reasons I think you mentioned ATT, and since their inception to now, I mean, granted, they've had some financial ability because of Dan Lambert putting in money and, you know, investing in there. There's probably a lost leader for a long time, but regardless, like they've always had guys waving that ATT banner and putting out guys for a long time. Where you've seen the Militich camp, a great example. I love Pat and all those guys. I just had Jens on. Like, it was just a bunch of tough guys that kind of came together, trained together, went out, beat the crap out of guys, and you never really saw that second tier never really took off. It kind of, they were the king of the cage champs, and then or they'd make their UFC debut and then kind of fall off.
Yep.
What are like when you're coaching, are you building infrastructure for the guys to take care of the next guys, or do you feel like right now it's you kind of like, I got to figure out where my 80% of my time is going to go, and it's that top 20?
Well, no, I think we definitely build. So we build from within, and I have a very specific system of the way that I coach. And a lot of the guys now who are, you know, kind of at the end of their career, they could easily come in and really help out with my system of coaching, the way that I do things. I think I do things probably much different than a lot of other coaches out there. And so we are building that infrastructure as we go.
Give me an example. Like, what's one of the things that we don't have to give away the secret Santino sauce? What's something you do different?
I think it's not even the systems that I do, but the actual moves, the way that I take backs is different than other people. The way that I cage wrestle. We're doing a thing today, almost like a flow chart, for lack of a better term, on cage defensive wrestling. It's basically a compass, all right? North, south, east, west. So left, right, up, down. You know, if somebody has you pinned on the cage, depending on where their weight is, you're going to exit the path of least resistance. So, okay, I'm going to go to my left. Okay, I'm going to go to my right. Okay, if they're taller, I'm going to lift them up. If they're lower, I'm going to shove them down. So just going over things like that, making people understand the situation, the bigger picture, what the different options versus being like focusing on the macro level first.
More like a concept of here's conceptually where we want to be and do versus like the nuance of.
Exactly. Going macro to micro.
Right.
And you go macro level. Okay, if we're here, you go left. If you're here, you go right. Now, in going left or right, there are a bunch of micro differences and different variations of things that are going to occur. But really, you have to always go macro and then to micro, because it doesn't matter if you're not doing these big things right. The smallest things on the planet don't matter. You know what I mean? Right. So in terms of systems, that's kind of it. Going back to the gyms, though, I don't think it's a building a systems type of thing. Like, I think AT is actually different. I think they've had more success in the long term because they've got multiple head coaches, and you've got Parampina or Marcos D'Amata, whatever the hell his nickname is. You have Mike Brown, you have Conan, you've got 4, 5, 6 different head coaches over at ATT. So you have a head coach, assistant coaches for different fighters. Even take Militich, take AKA, take Alliance. You've got one head coach for 10 fighters, okay? And then all of a sudden these 10 fighters start doing really well. So then all of a sudden you've got one head coach for 15 fighters, then 20, then 30. There's not enough coaches to give the fighters the amount of attention that they deserve. And I think that is what collapses the system, is they're with the more people, coaches are greedy. MMA, we're bottom feeders in MMA. We are fighting over scrap. So you get a coach and he's making, I don't know, we'll say $100,000 a year, which is probably even more than most coaches are making. Say they're making $100,000 a year, which is finally decent money for what we do as a profession. Now all of a sudden they're making $130,000 a year because you've got these other, fighters coming in. But really you need to hire 2 more coaches, but you've got to pay them, we'll say $30,000 a year. So your 130 just went down to 70 now. And there's not enough coaches, there's not enough money, there's not enough infrastructure in the sport to sustain this stuff. And so coaches, gyms as a whole, add more fighters and more fighters and more fighters, but they're not adding the coaches. And I think that is the biggest thing why these teams collapse.
Yeah, just not having enough chiefs to go around with all the Indians.
Yeah, that's it.
That's crazy, man. What's you've been keeping up with like the ADCC? Any of the or all the Danaher
No,
splits?
I don't. I do not keep up with jiu-jitsu or Abu Dhabi or any sort of grappling at all. I don't know why. It kind of bothers me. Like the whole like jiu-jitsu, like the rivalries, the stuff. Now that I'm coaching MMA, I feel like that's so real. Just in the sense that I don't mean to diminish jiu-jitsu at this point, but fighting is so hard and the money is so real. And there's so many big implications that I feel like jiu-jitsu gets a little bit blown out of proportion. To me, it's fun. A jiu-jitsu match is fun. People should be having fun. But you get these guys and they make it so real and so mad. I'm like, what are we mad about? We're grappling over here. Nobody's elbowing you in your face. Like,
it's
what are we getting mad about?
As like a fight. It's like,
yeah.
I think that's the general. I felt that way too. I know a lot of guys in the MMA community, guys that have fought. It's almost like when we've stepped in the cage, people say, we're going to war. The guys that like the military vets kind of roll their eyes and like, you're fighting, bro. You're and the same thing when we're like fighting in the cage and someone's like, yeah, I got to fight this weekend. I'm like, oh, where are you fighting? They're like, Grapple Quest 2000. I'm like, oh, you have a jiu-jitsu match. Like, yeah, it'd be a tough fight. I'm like, you know, it's like, but I get it. I think it's that aspect and a lot of it too. And I think there's the old school jiu-jitsu guys where for a long time, the heel hooks and leg locks were looked at as like taboo kind of moves, right? Like it was like bending a finger. It was cheap. It wasn't, you know shitty wrestling. You were one dimensional. Now it's like everyone's, super, super heavy on the leg locks, super heavy. But I don't think a lot of that translates into MMA. And I think a lot of the guys, like people are like, I can't wait to see Gordon Ryan do MMA. I think Nicky Rod has a higher ceiling than Gordon Ryan does in MMA because he's more athletic and he has, he has more, he's extremely difficult to submit. I mean, he was submitting black belts 2 weeks into his jiu-jitsu just based on his cardio and his athleticism. What do you think about guys like Gordon Ryan or Nicky Rod ever getting into MMA, and where do you think that ceiling lies?
It lies with really their takedown ability. If they can't, jiu-jitsu does you zero good unless you can roll for a heel hook or get a takedown. There is no jiu-jitsu standing up. If you can't get me to the ground, like, what does it matter? So that's why you get guys like Gilbert Burns who transitioned well because he was a top player. You get, like somebody like that can transition. Guys attacking you touched on it. The sport is barambolos, heel hooks. You don't want to do that in MMA. If you miss a heel hook, you get your soul taken out of your body. You're getting punched. You do not want to be on your back. You do not want to be rolling for stuff. Now, using a heel hook to stand up is great. Using a heel hook, or if you're Paul Harris, using a heel hook to rip somebody's leg off and barbecuing it later, cool. But if you can't get the fight to the ground, then what do you do? It's kind of the same with like boxing. You get the best boxer or kickboxer on the planet. If they can't stop the takedown, what good does it do them? And I think that's the balance. I think having a good top heavy game, being able to cage wrestle, jiu-jitsu is a great, great, great foundation for MMA, but man, it is just part of the puzzle. So, but then you get guys like Charles Oliveira, who, the dude is a submission master. And I love to watch him in MMA because he can really mix it up and throw some submissions on. So those guys, I don't know. It's, who do we have right now? He just fought, lost, beat BJ Penn, heel hooked him. Ryan Hall.
Ryan Hall, yeah.
Yeah, Ryan Hall. So I think he's a perfect example right there. When he's able to get the rolling Barambolo, Imanari roll to the ground, look what he did with BJ. Right. And then was it Ilya Tipura who just knocked his face off. It was like, I don't care about your jiu-jitsu, I'm killing you. So I think Ryan Hall is the epitome of current jiu-jitsu going into MMA.
Yeah.
If that's all you have, man, the ceiling is pretty low.
And we saw Imanari, granted, not to the same level that guys are really, Imanari was way ahead of his time, but in terms of how detailed like Danaher and those guys have really gotten into the Ashis and whatnot, probably not at that level. But Imanari was the same way. Like if someone fought Imanari, everyone went, oh, I don't want to lose a leg. Yep. So that fear was in the back of your mind, but you also knew, like, he wasn't knocking you out. He wasn't taking you down and triangling you. Like, he was butt scooting, rolling into all those heel hooks. So if you're coaching someone like Ryan Hall, and he goes, all right, I got to fight in 90 days. What's the plan, coach?
Man, 90 days, that makes things a little bit different. I guess you got to balance attacking with their strengths and then focusing on their weakness. Like if it was like Ryan Hall wanted to come train with us full time. Okay, now we're just working cage wrestling. All right, that's all we're doing. Working cage wrestling. I'm not worried about people submitting you. We're closing the distance. We're going to build our foundation. We're going to build our cage wrestling, work on our striking. And then we start adding some stuff in, yada, yada. He shows up and has a fight in 90 days. Okay, now we've got to balance a fight. You're not going to become an Olympic gold medalist wrestler in 90 days. So now it's, how do we close the distance? How do we attack? How do we set up attacks, shoot in and then pull some leg locks out of our ass without having to go full Imanari on it. And that, at that point, you game plan. It's film and game plan. So anybody can be. We have a guy, Eric Anders is fighting Roman Dolidze. Dolidze is 11-1. He is a kind of a big giant Imanari type of guy. Not to that extent, but he's rolling for leg locks. He's going for heel hooks. And now it's all about, if I'm Dolidze, it's how do I get in a grappling situation without getting my head taken off. On that coaching side. Now on our side is, how do we beat this guy up and avoid the Imanari roll? Because we know that that's what is going to occur, some sort of a heel hook type of sweep. How do we avoid getting submitted? How do we avoid getting put on our back in the scramble? And that's really it. I wouldn't blanket statement it. That all comes down to game planning. And one of the things with game planning, and this is, I think I'm probably a little bit different than other people about game planning and watching film, is people look at weaknesses and they look, oh, so-and-so has this weakness, we attack here. But it doesn't matter what your weakness is if you don't have the strength to capitalize it. And I always think of football. If somebody has, the Jets are playing the Bucks, okay? And the Bucks are like, all right, well, the Jets have a really weak defensive line, okay? But if you have a weak defensive line, but you don't have any running backs, you're not going to run the ball. So it still doesn't do you any good. You got to match skill for skill. So even if they have, okay, so the Bucks have a weak defensive line, the Jets think they can run up the middle all they want. They don't have a running back to run, but you've got the best wide receiver in the league. Oh, but they have good cornerbacks. Fuck it. Go up against that good cornerback. Let's see if, hey, we have the best wide receiver in the league. I'm not going toward my weakness. I'm going toward my strength. And that's, you got to balance strengths versus weaknesses. And I think people always try and avoid other people's strengths, but don't do it at the risk of avoiding your own strength. Take strength for strength any day of the week over weakness for weakness, because it's a lot easier to gauge what your strength is than what your weakness is. So,
well, speaking of weaknesses, I think you made great points. Speaking of weaknesses, I want to get your opinion on John Jones's weakness of getting pinched every time he's in Vegas. How crazy.
Man, that's cocaine and battery is a hell of a combination.
Yeah, battery. It's crazy that he's constantly like, I think being a fighter, right, I always have a soft spot for guys to a certain extent. At what point, like, where do you stand on that just personally? Like, I look at that now and I'm like, if the UFC never has him back again, good riddance, because everybody gets the fuck up pass for sure. Everybody gets one. Two, you kind of got to go, all right, this is a little casual. And then you have that argument of, does he owe the fans? Does he, do you have to change who you are for your personality? And I'm like, that's probably who John Jones is, regardless of if he's making $10 an hour or $10 million a year. Money will amplify who you are. But at this point, I'm just like, you know what, people, do you look at it and go, what he does outside of the cage shouldn't affect his UFC, or do you look at it as he has some responsibility to be more of a professional athlete?
I don't think any professional athlete has any responsibility to anybody to be a representative for anything. Mike Tyson went to prison for rape. That is a serious allegation, man. Michael Vick went to prison for dog fighting. Like those, if you hold them accountable for things like that for the rest of their lives, they will never make a living. Like, even people leave prison and they need a job. Now, you know what I mean? Like, those are things, those are separate from the job market. Now, in terms of sponsorships and endorsements, absolutely. Like these, people, Nike has dropped John Jones. Gatorade has dropped John Jones. I'm sure sponsors won't touch Mike Tyson. I'm sure sponsors won't touch Mike Vick. In terms of their job and their earning potential, if they're not breaking rules with, and I know the NFL has like conduct rules and stuff like that. So, but I don't think John Jones's legal issues, and I don't think they're right at all. I don't think Mike Tyson should be out doing what he was doing, whether he's innocent or not. Vic dog fighting, John Jones, doing coke, hitting his wife. They're abhorrent, absolutely repugnant behaviors. But I don't know that those are synonymous with his work environment. Now if he was a children's camp counselor, okay, maybe so. The dude fights people in a cage for a living. He's supposed to be a piece of shit based, what I mean? Like, what else is the guy going to do? And what do we expect from all of these people? I always ask people, what malfunction do you have if you're a fighter? Like, you're not the most functional fighter on the planet. It's got to be fucked up somehow, because why in the hell else is anybody going in a cage fighting somebody? So for us to have expectations of conduct for anybody that goes in there, I don't know that it's definitely probably not PC, but I don't, whatever they do out of the cage, I mean, that's on them. Does he face legal ramifications? If so, then he's got to face those legal ramifications, and he's going to have to deal with that separate from whatever happens in his job. I don't think that he should be reprimanded for that. I don't think Miguel Torres should have been. Was it Miguel Torres? Yeah, who got fired from making
the
jokes. Yeah, for the UFC. Like, man, look, those comments are bad. He made bad, they were made in poor taste. Sponsors drop him. People don't want to follow him on Twitter. Cool. But in terms of fighting, I personally don't think that it should affect him.
What do you think is going to happen now that the UFC is not only owned by WMG, but also now that they're a publicly traded company that merged? So there's definitely more red tape and bureaucracy that's going to be involved in these decisions.
Oh, man, once money gets involved, things get very weird very fast. So it wouldn't surprise me if John Jones has to do some community service and a training and do some BS PR type of stuff. And it wouldn't surprise me if he gets fired and they never talk with him again, and, they blackball him for life, or anything in between. We're in a cancel culture situation now. We're in a cancel culture. Like, years ago, 10 years ago, I don't know that anybody would even blink. Now, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if he got a TV deal out of it, or if he got stabbed and his whole family got shipped out to Afghanistan.
Yeah, no, it's freaking crazy, man. We live in fucking nutty times, like the whole cancel culture. That's why podcasts, I think, are so fun, because you can say what you want. You don't have to be edited. You don't have to worry about as many ramifications, repercussions yet.
Yeah, well, just till they come out, people are like, oh, people are saying Santino said blah blah blah. I'll be tomorrow. I get fired for some random shit I say on here.
We'll edit it all out, except for not really.
Just gotta be careful about it.
We're actually gonna add stuff in, and we're gonna subtitle this in Korean and just make you look completely racist. Just like everything.
Dub it in. I would expect it.
So speaking of people that are in trouble constantly, so I've been like back and forth on Conor McGregor since his first fight. I was never on the Conor bandwagon until he fought Jose Aldo, and honestly, I bet against him in that Jose Aldo fight. I think I was like, you know what, Jose Aldo, great jiu-jitsu, great counter puncher, and does everything Conor does well, except maybe manage distance as much, but he also has leg kicks. I thought that fight was going to go the other way, and after that, I went, oh shit, okay, McGregor's a stud, makes a ton of money, makes a ton more money, fights Mayweather, and now we're seeing this like misfiring McGregor. Where do you think we're going to see Conor's trajectory go over the next, say, 24 months?
I think he's going to get one or two more big pay, probably one. I think he's gotten his biggest paydays. And I think Conor is probably the smartest fighter to have ever entered the sport. He did it so right, man. Like, he played his cards. He didn't have the best hand, and he played his cards to a T. He got the Chad Mendes fight, so he got the interim title that way. So yeah, I forget what happened. Aldo got out, so then he got a title. So then he got another payday with the Aldo fight on another title. Then he goes up and he fights up a weight class. Or did he get the second title first before he fought Diaz?
I think he had both titles, and then I think he fought Diaz.
Yeah, he was supposed to fight Rafael dos Anjos, and then that fight got pulled.
Right.
He went up and fought Diaz, but he fought Diaz at 170. Right. So now him going up to 70, it's all in his favor. If he wins, he's great. If he loses, he's supposed to lose. He's at 170. Then he just played his freaking cards as well as you could play them. The Mayweather thing, if he loses that, it doesn't matter. It's boxing. He made more money than anybody else in the sport at that point. Then he comes back. I think he has one more big payday, and then I think he's done. Just because people want to see him. I'll tune in. Everybody wants to see, and even the way he lost, like he lost his last one because he broke his foot. So now it's like, or
It's
he broke
easy
his
to
ankles.
discount that fight and be like, well,
Yes.
yeah, you know, who knows what would happen.
Yep, exactly. So before he was just getting ready for, and even the Poirier fight before that, he was just using that as a tune-up fight for Pacquiao. So he's only boxing. Okay, well now he hurt his ankle. He's got one more big fight left in him, and then I think he fades off into obscurity, and we never see him again.
Who do you think that fight is?
Man, I don't know, because it depends on who the money fight is at the time. I wouldn't be surprised if it's Nate Diaz.
You don't think Masvidal's in the mix there?
Oh, he was actually going to be my next name. So Nate Diaz, George Masvidal,
right? Like, because they're both kind of at that like which way. They had some heat. But I think George is coming off of a 2-2 or something, and I think that is he 2-2 or 2-1. But I think that it's a good like BMF title fight.
Yep, and I think that's it. I think he fights one of those two, and then I think he never fights again.
Yeah.
But honestly though, the dude has done everything that you could do. I think we discount him now because he's lost a few in a row, but man, he is phoning it in because he's getting millions and millions of dollars. What more do you want? The guy won a featherweight title. He won the lightweight title. He made more money than anybody on the freaking planet. He's the highest paid athlete 2 years in a row. Fought Mayweather, in his first boxing fight, the best boxer we've ever seen, and went, 8th, 9th round, whatever it was. Like, what does he have to prove? The guy has legitimately done it all. And now people expect more out of him. Like, the dude has done everything you can do. Like, man, hats fucking off to you, McGregor, man. I will pay for whatever you are selling me because you deserve it.
Fantastic, man. Well, if people want to find you, and besides your OnlyFans page, what's the best way to get a hold of you? Instagram, what's your handle?
Instagram, just Santino DeFranco. So, and I think so. I've been doing some more stuff on YouTube. I think it's I don't even know, Santino DeFranco 82. Because I was born in 1982. I'm very clever with my names.
So Santino DeFranco 82 on YouTube.
On YouTube, and then just Santino DeFranco on IG. And I've been actually doing a lot of YouTube stuff for betting on fights, and I am fucking killing it. Yeah. So
you should
I'm doing well, man.
You should do like a thing where you start with like $1,000 and you have people like follow along with your bets for like a month or two.
That's not a bad idea. It's not a bad idea. I've been killing it. I think last week I went 4-1. Week before that I went 5-1.
Are you parlaying or are you just picking the single fights?
So I usually just pick single fights, but every once in a while I will parlay. The thing with parlays is they're lotto tickets.
Sure.
Because you get a 5-man parlay, going 4-1 doesn't do you any damn good. It's like getting a lotto ticket. You get 8 out of 9 numbers. Well, all right, you get your $2 back. That's it. Better luck next time. So the smart money is to go bet straight up. But parlays every once in a while can definitely get you some coin.
Nice. So you're going to become a professional sports bettor, open some more Shell gas stations. Right? I can talk to you on offline about that. How did you get into the gas station business? Like you're a writer to English professor. Now I'm teaching people how to choke people. I also bought a gas station and the crispy chicken is ready to rock.
Well, writing it, just really quickly to touch on that, I have a memoir that's coming out. It's supposed to come out October 12th, but it's going to come out a little bit later. COVID, all the stuff, everything's being pushed back in the world right now, but that should be coming out soon. But the gas station, COVID did the gas station to me, because when COVID first started, the gyms were shut down. Everything was shut down, and it freaked me out. And I was thinking, man, I don't really have job skills that I can go out there and get another job making the amount of money that I make right now. So I've done other stuff. I have iPhone apps. I have Android apps. I've started supplement companies. I've owned gyms before. I've done this stuff, but I didn't want to start something from scratch. It's too much time and energy. I'm over it. So I started looking. There are brokerage sites. There's different sites that have business listings. And I looked at every business for sale for months, because I thought I need to have a second option in case MMA isn't a thing anymore, in case gyms aren't a thing anymore. And so I started looking at every business that there was, and long story short, the amount of money needed for gas stations for the amount of money coming in for gas stations was good. And gas stations was one of the regular businesses that I would see absentee owned or semi-absentee owned. I didn't want to buy a job. I don't want to be the world's best gas station attendant. And I'm like, okay, that's $382. And so I was looking at it, and for the amount of money that I needed to put in, for the amount of money that I'll get every year, it made sense. And so I just started looking at it, and I bought a freaking gas station, spent $700,000, put all of my savings into it, and bought a freaking gas station. And I'm looking, it's actually doing really well. And I'm hoping by next spring to summer to buy gas station number 2.
Nice. Nice. And the irony of this is that you drive a what? What do you drive, Santino?
So while I was in escrow buying my gas station, I decided it was a good idea to buy a Tesla.
Thanks for joining us. Thanks, man. We're going to end it on that.